This is Firecrackers, and we're about to get started. And the topic we have at hand is controversies on ASUU and federal government agreement. We know that at the beginning of last week, ASUU threatened to go on strike since the federal government is not really giving them the response they wanted concerning the agreement that they signed with the federal government. Well, the Minister of Education, Tujala, on Thursday initially said that there was no agreement signed with ASUU and what they usually bring was proposals. But then later, he affirmed that the 2009 agreement was signed. That was after ASUU challenged the whole thing. And then he's admitting the 2009 agreement was signed. So now to talk about the issues that we have at hand right now, I don't think Nigeria can bear to have the university staffs going on strike once more. It has always been happening, and then we are hoping we do not see it again. But what do you make of this situation that we have at hand right now?
Thank you very much. I'm happy that the minister reversed himself, because we're all here in this country. We knew that there was an agreement between ASUU and the federal government. And we knew that this agreement had been the focus of discussion. 2009 agreement, government reneging on it, government promising and not fulfilling promises, and INEC insisting, and ASUU insisting that on this agreement they stand. So that agreement, everyone knew that there was an agreement. Even the man in the streets knew that there was an agreement. There was something called 2009 agreement between the federal government and ASUU. So for a minister of education to now come and say there was no agreement was very embarrassing. What briefing was he giving before he got into the ministry? And how up to date is he about the ministry? But thank God that he came out to say, yes, actually there was an agreement, meaning that he had now got the records correct. Sometimes you can have some problems with records, and it may now give a wrong impression of your attitude to one issue or the other. So now that we know there is an agreement, there was an agreement between ASUU and the federal government. Now the question now is, how do we implement this agreement? And 2009 to this place is not yesterday. That's how many years? 2009 to 2025. So that agreement in itself ought to have even been reviewed over and over again. That agreement ought to have been implemented fully by now. Yeah, it was or have even had first stage, second stage, third stage after that agreement. We are still stopped. It's stopped in 2009. Can you imagine? So when we ought to have moved further past 2009. But now that we have said there is an agreement, the thing now is, one, is that agreement still realistic? Does that agreement still answer to the needs of our university system? Is that agreement still okay for ASUU and the federal government? If not, the thing is, one, to begin to implement whatever aspect of that agreement that is still relevant. Number two, to now start to renegotiate whatever aspect of that agreement that needs renegotiation. The federal government, the presidency at the moment of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, must not give the impression that education is not one of his priorities. So that was the impression I was given by the previous administrations, that education was not their priority. And that was why the budget allocation to education was measly, was infinitesimal compared to the UNESCO recommendation of a threshold of 26% of the total national budget. Now that this government, that we all believe is a government that is that values education, because virtually everybody there is educated. There is nobody in that government that is not educated. We used to complain that we didn't have a president that is a graduate, but we have a president that is overgraduate now. A president that went to school not only in Nigeria, that went to school abroad, that went to some of the finest universities, that worked in some of the threshold organization, somebody who could work in mobile oil. You don't think that that person is somebody that you can just push aside. Somebody who has been governor, who has been senator. So the question now shouldn't be that they don't know the value of education. It is now whether they actually want to apply the right measures to education. And they must tell us the reason why they should not. Because we have been told, it has been confirmed, that no nation develops faster and better than the level and the quality of education. And we have seen that all over the place. We have seen China that is taking over the whole world now. Why is the quality of the education they are giving their people? That is why they are making all this invention that every time you see social media is flooded with China has done this, China has done that, China has done this, China. The people who are they illiterate? They are not illiterate, they are educated people. It is education. So education ought to be the pillar and the foundation of our development. If we say that we want to develop the country and we are not giving the right, the correct priority to education, we are just wasting our time and we are just paying lip service to this issue of development.
Right, thank you so much, sir. And now moving on to Jide Ojo, our guest joining us virtually from Abuja, who is a public affairs analyst. Good evening and thank you so much for joining us at this time.
It's my pleasure. Good afternoon. Happy Sunday.
Okay, all right. Good afternoon to you too. So, the topic that we have at hand right now is issues surrounding the federal government of Nigeria and ASUU agreement. Finally, we have the Minister of Education acknowledging that there was a 2009 agreement that was signed with ASUU and the federal government. But with the whole thing going on, what do you make of the situation of this impasse that has always been going on with ASUU and the federal government of Nigeria?
Thank you. My take is that I think we have, like the guest in the studio said, successive administration have been paying lip service to education. And I was hoping that Tinubu administration would be different. We are talking of an agreement of 16 years, which has actually, I won't say it has not been reviewed. It's been reviewed a number of times. Um, I write for the Punch newspaper, and I know I've weighed in on this issue a couple of times. So it's not entirely true that the agreement has not been reviewed. In fact, the last review, I think, took place in 2021 or 2022. So under the Buhari administration. And you recall that at that time, in 2020, universities were shut for 10 months. And in 2022 or 2021, it was shut for 8 months. And schools lost 2 academic sessions over the implementation of this 2009 ASUU agreement. And part of that had been the issue of exempting academics from the IPPIS, which Buhari administration eventually agreed to. Issue of university autonomy, issue around professors retiring at the age of 70. So some of the agreements have actually been implemented in some sense. It's just that comprehensively, I think majority of the items are yet to be fully implemented. And unfortunately for the Tinubu administration, it came with the same mindset as the successive administration, like that of his successor from the time of Umaru Musa Yar'Adua to Goodluck Jonathan to Buhari. Because what happened was, I read somewhere, although the Punch newspaper in its editorial was saying Tinubu established additional 8 universities, I read somewhere that it was actually 22. Of course, it may well be that not the entire 22 were newly established universities, but we have seen in the past 2 years, many polytechnics have been upgraded to university, like Yaba Tech, like Taisho College of Education in Lagos, like several other colleges. If we are there, any College of Education has now been upgraded to an award-winning education university. But the idea is, are we funding education enough? The answer is no. establishment of university have been turned to what I would call constituency project, where senators and ministers will just as something from Abuja as a donation, what they can use to campaign. I recall that Senator Abiola Olamilekan, who is running for the governorship of APC in 2027, got one for his people in Yewa. The president also established one in Iragbiji's ancestral home and several others like that. So instead of concentrating on making the existing one functional, we have the president approving several other polytechnics, colleges of education, and universities. And that's why, I joined in commending the federal government in saying that there will be 7-year moratorium to establishing more universities in Nigeria, because the existing one are not even they are underutilized, particularly the recently established one. They are not performing optimally. Imagine a university in northern Nigeria that was said to have a staff nominal of 1,200 staff, but only 800 students. Only 800 students, and you have 1,200 staff. You have some universities that are not even getting any JAMB application from students. So what it shows that our problem is not just having more than enough institutions of learning, but what is the quality of those institutions, and how do we also deal with the falling standard of education? Because while ASUU is about tertiary education, we have this problem from even the public primary schools and secondary schools as well. For many of these schools, it's the whole student association, the alumni, that are now doing capital projects in many of those secondary schools. And it's quite unfortunate that government at all levels have shirked their responsibility to adequately fund the education, which is the crux of human capital development. So a lot needs to be done. And I just hope Dr. Alausa will get it right this time around, saying that the review committee will now involve the Ministry of Justice, and let's hope that they will be able to find a lasting solution to the ASUU nagging problem once and for all now.
Nigeria education system can stand another strike right now. And now talking about strike in Nigeria, this is the tool we would say lots of unions usually use to get the government's attention. Do you think that going on strike would be the best thing in anyone's interest at this time? Or do you think perhaps it's time for it, ASUU or other union bodies find another alternative rather than going on strike and grounding activities, which is detrimental to the economy?
Yeah, thank you. I have always said that we should think out of the box. That had been my problem with ASUU. I have criticized them a lot, even though I belong in that constituency. And I have said that let us think out of the box. Is there not something else that we can do? Because this strike that we are embarking upon at all time does not affect those who are in government. Many of them don't have their children schooling here. If they school here at all, they are not in private, they are not in public institutions, they are in private institutions which are not affected. And they are schooling abroad. And the strike also affects the integrity of our universities, the integrity of the academic qualifications that we shone out. You can imagine universities were on strike for 8 months. And before that, they had been on strike for another 4 or 5 months. And then at the end of the day, you now say that you will make up for over 1 year that you lost. You lost 2 sessions. You say you will make up. How will you make up? You will now begin to rush the students, crash program. And the answer, when they are looking at you, they will say that the certificates that you are getting, shunning out of Nigeria is not up to standard. And then it will begin to affect everyone that goes out there. including even those that got their certificates decades ago. So when I said that it's important for ASUU to think about that negative effect, not only on the students, even on they themselves, because somebody called me and said, what kind of lecturers do you have in Nigeria that can be out of the classrooms for 8 months, not thinking, were they doing research? Were they doing anything? What were they doing in those 8 months? They themselves will be affected because they won't be able to get even people, their peers from other universities, to see them as people who are serious. So I say let us think out of the box. But thinking out of the box may be difficult for people who are not used to thinking out of the box. People who easily resort to strike. Strike is the only weapon they have, is the most available weapon. That is the only one we can use. The government is not talking, the government is not listening. It's only when we go on strike that they will call us. And it becomes so because we also have a public that looks on as if it is not concerned about what is happening. I am surprised. I see, there was a time I even decided to call a press conference of parents. Why should parents just keep quiet and pretend as if this thing does not affect them? We should come out, we should speak. I was arranging that before they now call up the strike, I wanted to, I said, let parents also talk. Because to find out that parents too are not talking, society is quiet, it's like everything is okay, and then the government is able to go on. If we have mass protest, if parents storm the streets, and we are insisting that government must sit down and discuss with ASUU, government will have no choice but to sit down and discuss with ASUU. But if we now go on as if nothing was amiss, government could sit down and do nothing. So and ASUU will have no choice but to go on strike. Otherwise, if other stakeholders had been really interested, particularly parents, if we had been interested, and pressure groups, we have been interested, they have taken much interest in it. Not unlike the other time when we went to Ojota and we were doing you see, if we had done that during ASUU strike, it would have made more meaning, it would have been impactful, and then that would have helped us to ensure that ASUU does not go on strike at every point in time. But if ASUU is left only to his own devices, if nobody comes to the rescue of ASUU, if everybody just leaves it as if it is the problem of ASUU, whereas it is our problem, it is the problem of all of us, then ASUU would have no choice but to keep going on strike. But the question ASUU themselves should also ask, that I've been asking them, is, if strike fails, what else? Since we went on strike for 8 months, what did you achieve at the end of the day? And when you came back from that strike, your salaries were not paid. You now have to be begging to get that salary paid. And up to now, I'm not sure that they've gotten all their entitlements, everything they ought to have got as a result of that strike. So of what benefit is the strike of 8 months?
Definitely, that's something that we do need to talk about. But before we move on with this discussion, let us first of all go on a short break. And when we return, we will be talking about this topic. Just stay with us. This is Firecrackers, and we are talking about the issue with the federal government of Nigeria and ASUU. And I have our virtual guest on standby, Jide Ojos, which this next question is actually going to him. Do you think that perhaps in some ways the nature of Nigerians as a people could be contributing to the problems that we're having in the society, especially when it comes to the issue of strike and ASUU? Because an average Nigerian just tries to cope with whatever comes your way, be it from the federal government, be it from nature. We always just have this immense shock absorber for a lot of things that is happening around us. Do you think that perhaps this might be the reason why we don't really protest that much when issues like this are happening in education sectors and all other sectors? Thank you so much for staying with us. We are still discussing the issue of the controversy between the federal government of Nigeria and ASUU 2009 agreement. And we have Jide Ojos joining us virtually from Abuja on standby. So before we went on that break, I was asking, do you think that the attitude of Nigerians as a people might be what's contributing to some of the problems we are having in our education sector? Since an average Nigeria is usually content or just finds a way to cope with whatever is being thrown his way, be it challenges from federal government, from life in general. We seem to have that big shock absorber. So do you think that that might be the reason we don't demand for change much whenever things are not going the way it's supposed to go?
I beg to disagree that we are not demanding for change much. I think it's just about perception. Time and again, Nigerians have come out en masse to protest bad governance. We had that last August 2024, for some 10 days. End bad governance protest, end hunger protest. In 2020, we had end SARS protest. In between, there are different protests by the Nigerian labor unions and the civil society groups. But you see, this is a democracy, and no matter how many years you protest, um, you can't have a president by fiat. You still have to end up at the negotiation table. Right now, ASUU and federal government team are negotiating. We need to allow that to pan through. Um, we cannot just go on the streets and protest for protest's sake. Particularly the reason why you and I are discussing this issue is to avert another round of strike action. And don't forget, even when ASUU is not on strike, we have seen situations where NASU, the SANU, and other unions within the university system have also gone on strike. And how many, strike has its own limited utility value, because that's why some people take to armed struggle when they feel that the government is not listening enough. You can see that that was what led to the struggle in the Niger Delta region. For many decades, they were protesting, civil protests. If you recall the Adakaboro protest, the OD declaration, and all of that, up to the time of what was the name of the guy that was killed, the Ogoni Nine, Kensarowiwa. Kensarowiwa was using plays, was using novel, was using theater to protest and mobilize the Ogoni people of the South region to protest against the escalation of the environment. Well, what happened? He was extrajudicially murdered by the government of the day, until recently that the federal government last June 12 granted him state pardon, and the 9 other chiefs that were killed alongside with him. People have since moved on. And that was what led to the violent military action in the Niger Delta, until we now have the creation of Niger Delta Ministry and now the Niger Delta Development Commission. So what I'm trying to say is that strike and civil protests has their own limited action, and we cannot be found to be calling out people to take to hands on issues that can be resolved through dialogue. I think we should allow the dialogue option to take place, and see whether through dialogue we can have the same thing as we would have achieved if we had people protesting. Because in time past, people have died in the course of protests. I have been part of several student protests in my days in University of Lagos. I was part of those who protested against the annulment of June 12 election. Some of our colleagues died then. Some became incapacitated for life, but people moved on generally. So you cannot say that Nigeria don't have a culture of protest. We do have culture of protest, but after protest, what next? You go on protest, it is even the average citizen that you are protesting on their behalf that will say your own too much. Why don't you face your own business? And of course, protest does not actually mean work to rule or moving on the streets. You can also protest. I've used my platform as a public commentator, as a columnist with the Punch. I've used it to protest certain policies, bad policies of government over the decades. This is my 35 years of writing for newspapers across board. So what I'm saying is that it all depends on perception. People do different things to protest. Even when you have a phoning program and people will call in to express their reservation about certain things, it's a form of protest. So it's not just until when you march on the streets that you can protest. Even sit at home is also a form of protest.